now. Okay, so here we have wonderful Barbara Coloroso. Thank you, Barbara, for joining us tonight. Barbara is an internationally renowned speaker, parenting expert, author, and of interest to our audience, she's also a mom of two childhood cancer survivors. She's written a number of best-selling books, and you can find those and other resources on her website, kidsarworthit.com. And she'll be providing OPAC with a handout that I'll be sharing with our families tomorrow. And yes, I will be sharing the recording as well on our OPAC social media and website. So that'll be on tomorrow. Barb, want to talk now? Want to start?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me back again in this crazy time of COVID-19. It's been an interesting world for all of us. I just want to make one correction here, and it's my bad that I didn't catch it right away. I have one daughter who is a cancer survivor, and I have another daughter who has a lifelong illness. One was diagnosed with a lifelong illness, one was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. And as all families, we have suffered this year having lost 5 family members, from a very elderly aunt to a young nephew, from COVID and COVID-related issues. So we've all been in this crazy time of loss, grief, and change. But those of you who have been faced with a child with cancer during this time know that it's added an additional burden with COVID in terms of hospital visits, being able to be close with family members for support and with friends for support and the like. So I'll share some of our story with you this evening, and please feel free to ask any kind of question. The questions will go directly to OPAC and will be shared by the host. And so you don't have to worry that you don't want it public or the like. And I'll answer those questions as we go along. Handout that you will get, so you're not writing furiously tonight, will come electronically. And it's called Parenting Through Crisis, Helping Kids in Times of Loss, Grief, and Change. And to that, I need to add COVID-19, because that's real. And all of your children are at a higher risk, and you have to take extra precautions that other families may not, and other families may not understand. Why, even though you may be vaccinated, that you would want to keep your child safe from others around them. In Parenting Through Crisis, we're going to deal mostly with illness. It can be a long-term illness, or it can be acute illness, as our daughter, Maria, faced. She, by the way, is now in her 40s and has one son. So she survived, became a stunt woman. Although I must say, she was diagnosed at 17, 3 weeks before her 18th birthday, which makes her in the United States a child. So she was in the children's ward, to which we were most grateful, because the children's doctors seemed to handle things so much better for us. But she was one of the few that actually left that ward. Now, you know, she's in her 40s. A lot has changed in the area of cancer, research and treatment and the like. But we went through all the passages of grief attached to that, which I will get into. But when Maria was healing from her surgeries, our son, I have 3 kids, Henri and Joe, they're 3 years apart. And so I had 3.5 years. I often say I made up for my convent years, because I used to be a nun, and met my husband after I'd left. And then we married and had 3 kids in 3.5 years, Anna Marie and Joe. Many of you know their names. But when she was in a life-threatening situation with her brother had a classmate who killed himself, who had been very healthy, an athlete, and he came home so upset that this young man had killed himself. And he said, "That's not fair, Mom. It's not fair. Maria wants to live and she has a life-threatening illness. And my classmate killed himself." And I said to him, "Joe, life is not fair. It hurts and it's very, very good. It's all three of those things. And we have to remember all three. We cannot deny one. There are threads in our tapestry. And for those of you who've had a child diagnosed with cancer, that is a big, ugly thread that's gone through the tapestry of your family, but it's there. We have to say it's not fair, and it does hurt, and life is very, very good. So we want to look at in times of when there is not grief, or there is time when there's not a major loss in our lives, all of our children need what I call the Tao of parenting: time, affection, sense of optimism. Tao is a Zen Buddhist term. It means a path. There is not one path. My kids are like day, night, and afternoon, as your children may be as well. They're very unique and very different in their personalities. And what may work for one may not work for another. And what may work in one family may not work for another family. So what you want to look at here is, in the rough times, if you have practiced the Tao of parenting in the good times, during these rough times, it'll come more naturally to you. But if you're in the midst of it and you've not had the opportunity to do this Tao of parenting, you can start today. It's an acronym. It's like an algebraic formula. It doesn't give you the answer, but gives you a path to the answer. It's TAO, kids in our time, our affection, and our sense of optimism. Time. Parenting is not an efficient profession. It takes a lot of time. But I'm not talking that quality time you read about in the magazines where you say, "Kids, we're going to take a day off and go to the Royal Museum." And the kids, "I don't want to go to the museum." You're going, and you're going to have a good time. And no, you cannot invite your friends. This is quality time with your family. They're not happy, you're not happy. Or, "Do you know how much money this fun has cost us?" That's not quality time. Sometimes quality time is the moments we have with our children. When they walk in the door and you say, "How's your day?" And they go, "Fine." But we're glued to our cell phone or our webcam, or we're working at home right now, as so many of you may be doing. You're trying to cram it all in, and your child's sometimes in virtual learning, sometimes in-person learning, and it's very chaotic. But do we take the time to notice how our children are speaking? Now, you remember, children speak 5 ways: their bodies, their face, their eyes, their tone of voice, and what they actually say. Only 20% of what any of us communicate to one another is done with the words we use. The other 80% is what our bodies doing when those words are being spoken or not spoken. If you're busy online and your child walks in, you say, "How's your day?" and you go right back to the screen and they go, "Fine," you've missed what they're really saying, because this is not fine. And so we need to be tuned in those moments. We ask them a question, we make a comment, let's listen to how their body. And when a child is in grief, they may do it in their own unique way, but you'll begin to sense with them through your own empathy or sympathy. And I'll get into the difference between those two, because those are very important. Empathy and sympathy are not the same, and both can lead to compassion, which is the must to relieve somebody else's suffering and wishing them well. But we need good times. We need to be able to have moments of joy in our lives every single day. And we'll get into that with the second part of the acronym. But giving kids that moment. I made the mistake when our daughter was diagnosed with cancer, and she was in the cancer ward undergoing treatment. Only one parent could be in there, and it was me. And I had friends offer to help. Nope, I'm going to do it myself. But a friend who had had breast cancer came to me and said, "I'd like to talk to your daughter about her own experience and my experience." And her daughter came to me and said, "Isn't it interesting? I can talk to you, And my mom can talk to your daughter, but we all have a difficult time talking to one another. And I said, that's because you and I are there supporting somebody with cancer. They've actually been on that journey. And right then I realized I need to allow others in. And then the real wake up call was after 3 days of treatment when our kids could come and visit Maria. Our son showed up. Now I married an Italian, so the kids are black, curly haired. Our son showed up with blonde hair. I lost it. And, I do this for a living. I should know better. And I did. I lost it. What are you doing? You've changed your haircut. How could you do this in the middle of your sister's treatment? And my husband said to our son, I think we need to leave now. And they walked out. And about 2 hours later, Joe came back with his hair again. Which is for mom. He said, Mom, I did this too, but I'll have it blonde one day. And the poor kid went back to the salon and had his hair re-dyed, realizing this was not a good time. But I realized that I was taking out on him all the anxiety and the hurt. And then he came back and he sat next to me and he said, Mom, I need you too. And I realized right then that I had missed his soccer games. I had missed events at school because I had been with Maria because I needed to be there and only me. And that was a big mistake. We need to allow others to help and support us, especially those who maybe been on that same journey as our child. Even if your child's quite young, someone else who's been there. Empathy is your ability to resonate with the same feelings. I am a mother of a child with cancer, but I've never had cancer. And so I can't empathize with her, have the same feelings as my friend did who had been through breast cancer, the fears, the fright that they might have, sometimes the terror that they might have. They could relate to that, and they could even joke about their scars in a way that someone who had not had cancer could not do it. So it's important we let those people into our lives. And her doctor invited her to a therapy group, Maria, to a therapy group. And she said, I don't need it. And he said, no, but the other kids need it. They need to see you. What it ended up being is he was spot on. She needed it as well. But when she went in there thinking she was helping others, she did help others, but they in turn helped her because they too were cancer survivors. Yes, my son did show up with blonde hair for graduation. And we just did a thumbs up for that. But you need to know you're going to make mistakes just as I did, and your own mistakes. So empathy is resonating the same feelings. Now, some of you may have indeed had cancer yourself, and then you can truly empathize with that child who has it. Your partner may not because they've not been there and done that. In our home, it is my husband whose mother died of cancer, and he himself had a bout with cancer. But it was after her treatment, and she was there to support him in a way that nobody else around us could do that. And so you need to understand that sometimes that time that you think you need to be there is time that it might be a good time to step back and let somebody else there. Now, sympathy, which has gotten a bad rap since empathy got to be the in word, but sympathy is being open to another person's pain and wanting to relieve their suffering. And that's where most of us would find ourselves, who ourselves of not having had cancer. My husband could empathize. My friend could empathize with Maria. I could sympathize. Out of empathy and sympathy can come compassion, which means you are totally energized to help relieve their suffering. But I would caution you here as well. I said to my daughter's oncologist, I wished it had been me that had the cancer. And he looked at me And he said, "What? Don't you think your child can handle her own burdens in life?" What a wake up. As if you know my parenting work, I talk about raising kids to be responsible, resourceful, resilient, compassionate human beings, um, who handle their own life's journey, and we're there to help them on that journey. And I've said that many times, but he hit home with that, that, you know what, you're there to support her on her life's journey, whatever that life journey is. So they need our time, they need our affection, a smile, a hug, and humor every single day. You say, well, that's kind of hard to come by sometimes. And yes, and that's why we need to surround ourselves with support from people who have been on this journey, from people who've never been on this journey, and just care deeply about us as a family. So a smile, a hug, and humor. Sometimes we have to muster that smile there. And sometimes it's a unique smile just between parent and child. And others don't quite get it, but your child does. The hug, and this is what's so hard during this time of COVID, is that other people that would like to embrace you to help you through this journey, but also to help your child through this journey, have to do it from a distance. I remember having our grandson's 12th birthday as a COVID birthday, and I drove by and waved to him and broke down in tears, because I couldn't give him the hug I wanted to give him. So you may be facing some of that, where there are family that want desperately to be there, or friends who you know cannot collect today with COVID for your child. And we have to find other ways to do that, to be able to reach out through Zoom, through a phone call, through a text message, through a card, through a gift, and say that we'll catch up on these, and let's keep track of the times that we would have loved that hug, and we're going to make it up. And so that smile, hug, and humor. Now you'll know that humor changes in times of loss and grief. Sometimes your child, especially those who are 7 and older, that age of reason, will use some gallows humor. And you might be taken back a bit by that gallows humor. There's so many cartoons online today that are truly gallows humor related to COVID. But your children will have gotten together with other kids who have cancer, and you might be a bit taken back about the humor they use. No, that's normal. A young boy, and not with cancer, but who had both parents die in a plane crash a few years ago, where no bodies were recovered. It was a plane crash here in the States, in the Everglades, and the bodies were not recovered. And a reporter asked him a year later how he was dealing with the death of his parents. And he looked the reporter in the eye, and with just a little bit of a smile, knowing this might take the reporter back, he said, well, I just remind myself that when those alligators got my parents, they got first class food. And the reporter was a bit taken back, and the boy chuckled a bit, knowing that he had that power to shock somebody. So don't be surprised if you find that your kid comes up with some humor that you and your child can share, and the others are just aghast at it. That humor keeps us going. We need to be able to laugh. Sometimes just watching a funny movie, and you think, well, I'm not up for fun. We need that sense of joy, that humor that can come through. So they need our time, they need our affection, but most importantly, for all of those of you who have gotten that diagnosis of cancer for your child, a sense of optimism. Now, I'm not talking that rose-colored optimism where all is right with the world, because you know what? It's not. What I'm talking about is what Viktor Frankl, a death camp survivor, called tragic optimism, that when you have been brought to your knees in grief, can you get up in the morning, fix your children breakfast, and say, we're going to get through this. We will get through this. We're not getting over it. We're not getting beyond it. We're getting through it. And how you deal with everyday adversity will give your kids a clue as to how optimistic this household is. I got stuck in Winnipeg on my way to the Pas, Manitoba in a snowstorm. The plane cannot get in for 8 hours. Some people ranted and raved for 8 hours. Some hit the bar for 8 hours, and some read a good book for 8 hours. All three groups got on the same plane 8 hours later. Some were still angry, ready to throttle the pilot, which would have made us later. Some, after 8 hours in a bar, weren't sure and didn't care if they were on a plane. And some had read a good book. I asked you, when's the last time anybody gave you 8 hours of uninterrupted time to read a good book? You see, it's your point of view. And that's what we have to have is, it's not that rose-colored optimism, but that we as a family will get through this. Now, those of you with a partner and your child has been diagnosed with cancer, just know this is a very difficult time for partners. Why? You're both going through the same grief. And that's where we need others to support us, to help us through that. This very difficult time, because it's real hard to support one another when we're both grieving. So looking at it and saying, yes, we will get through this. Yes, there are rough times here. Knowing that in that tragic optimism, that this too will pass. And you say, I've heard that so much. Let me tell you, it's an old Sufi thing. Sufis are people of wisdom in the Muslim tradition. We often hear this too will pass in the rough times, but the full quote is, remember, in the good times and the rough, this too will pass. And so if we can put that in perspective, that's that tragic optimism that we will get through this. And in the good times, we can build up that reservoir to be able to get through those rough times. So every child needs the Tao of parenting. 3 very simple, but not always easy things to do. Now, how do we tell a child about a diagnosis? We had the experience with our daughter where the doctor said 99% sure this is not malignant, but we're going to send it back east because it's an interesting kind of tumor that we've not seen here before. We'll know in about 10 days. Well, Maria went on her merry way to a dance 7 days later, and the phone call comes. It was early. They had the diagnosis. The doctors were 100% wrong. It was a virulent, rare form of cancer, much like the children at Chernobyl had experienced. And a from the East in New York had diagnosed it almost immediately, as soon as he saw it. He had recognized it from other young children that had had a similar cancer. And so she's at a dance. And both my husband and I were struggling about, how do you tell her that she has this rare form of cancer and that she needs surgery next Tuesday? And I went back to my own work in this regards, forgiving parents of kids who had shown up in jail, kids who've gotten in trouble and the like, working with troubled students. And then I asked the doctor, my goodness, how am I going to tell her? And the doctor said, Barb, you know how to do it. Just remember a simple formula. And the formula, again, is simple, but it doesn't make it easy. Whenever you have to tell the child who has the cancer or their siblings, you give the headlines first, then you give the facts, and then you be present to your child for whatever they need. Now, the last part is the hardest. We want to be there to be optimistic. We want to be there to say, you know, we're going to get through this. No, headline, facts, and then be present. So our daughter walked in having had a great dance, but she could tell from the looks of the two of us that something was amiss. And you don't try to soften it. There is nothing that can soften it. Well, they made a mistake, or we have some bad news. No, headline first. I said, Maria, you have cancer and you need to have surgery on Tuesday. And Dawn and I had anticipated what questions she might ask or how she might handle it. We missed it by a mile. She said, "Do you think I'll be able to graduate early?" And we just kind of looked at one another. She wanted to graduate early so she could start doing stunts before she went to university. She could have that period of time to do her stunts, to get involved in Hollywood. That was not what we thought. Now, did the other questions come later? Yes. Will I die? What kind of surgery will it be, and the like? All those questions came later. But if you give the headlines and then the facts and just be present to them at that moment, you will find what they need at that moment. Now that happens in any kind of loss situation, whether it's a death or a divorce or a long-term illness or an acute illness. The headline, facts, and then be present to your children. Now, how children respond will be very different for each one of them. Their ages and stages that they're at, the closeness they are to what the sibling you're talking about. In Nova Scotia, a family had to tell their other children that their brother had died in a car accident. And he had been battling an illness as well. And that's what they thought it was all about, that mom and dad had the tears in their eyes. But mom and dad came right out and said the brother who was coming home from university had died in a car crash. Your brother died last night in a car crash on his way home. Headline facts. The 15-year-old handled it as many teenagers do, with anger. He was angry at his mother for having his brother come home. He was angry at his brother for speeding, angry at the police, angry at the ambulance driver, angry at the curve in the road. He was angry. You will often see from adolescents an anger over that kind of information, that shock. The 10-year-old handled it as many 7 to 10-year-olds will do. Give me the facts, man. How fast was he driving? How did he die? When's the funeral? He wanted facts. It wasn't that he wasn't dealing with it emotionally, but right then, that's what he needed. And that's not uncommon, 7 to 10-year-olds. Then the 5-year-old put his arm around his mommy and said, it's all right, mommy. When he's done being dead, he'll be back. 5-year-olds don't get that death is permanent. And so you deal with the headlines, the facts, and then be present. And this will serve you in good stead for any kind of rough information you have to give children. Nothing, remember, nothing will buffer the pain of the actual headline. So don't try to buffer it with platitudes or with saying, you know, wow, it could have been worse. No, this is the worst right now. And so the headline facts, be present to your child for whatever they need. Now, the child who's actually been diagnosed, we have to be very honest with them and open and be ready to answer whatever questions they ask, including, do you think I will die from this? And you can very honestly say, I don't know, but let's find out from people who do know. And then we're going to get through this no matter what it is. And children, if they know what passages of grief to expect, and I'm talking from 3 years old on up, you can talk to them. A 4-year-old who'd been diagnosed with cancer stood up in front of her preschool class and said, I have Luke in me. And they all looked at the boy Luke in the classroom. He said, oh, no, not him. Though I have cancer cells in me. 4 years old. And she was explaining to her classmates that she had leukemia because her parents had trusted her with the information. This is her journey. And they explained it and she could understand it. And don't ever, ever give them misinformation. If you don't know, say, I don't know, but let's find out together. Or let's write that down so we can remember to ask the doctor, or let's see what research we can do. And so that you're honest with them. And if they say, do you think I'll die? You say, I don't know. We're going to get through this journey together. I'm here with you. We don't know. And we hope, all of us, live for a long time. Those of you with siblings that have siblings that you're talking to this, they might say, is it going to happen to me? Or mommy, is it going to happen to you? No, this cancer is very unique. And we are going to get through this journey together with your sister or your brother. And there are things you can do. Now, talk to me about the fears you might have. Well, I'm afraid I might get it, or I'm afraid she'll give it to me. And then you can begin to talk to your children about it. Talk to me about it is a wonderful line that I've used for my children through not just illnesses, but through anything. Talk to me. I'm upset. Talk to me about it. My oldest called me to let me know she was having her first grandchild. And I could have said, oh, I'm so glad to be a grandmother. I won't have to just take care of your dog. I'm so glad I didn't say that. I said, talk to me about it, Anna. And she sounded really upbeat and positive when she said that. And then she said, Mom, I'm so sick. How long does this last? Had I gone into my journey as a grandmother, I'd have missed her talking to me about her serious morning sickness. And all I could say to her was, I know for me, it lasted about 3.5 months, but by the 4th month, I felt really good. And then we could talk about it instead of going off on my journey, headlines and facts. And then talk to me about it, tell me about it. And find out where the child is coming from, your own adult child is coming from. Some are dealing with it where it's your child's child who has cancer, and you need to be there to be supportive of 2 generations. And make sure that you talk to me about it, tell me about it. Children may want to talk to grandma or grandpa in a way they might not talk to mom or dad. And I know my friend Maria shared things with her that she did not share with us because our friend had cancer and there was that bond there. And there may be a bond with grandma and grandpa and the sibling, and allow it to happen. So talk to me about it. Now, what are the passages? That's how we tell kids the information. And you say, well, I blew that one. Oh, there's always another time. We can say, I made a mistake. I blew that. We can do that in any of our parenting. But what are the passages of grief that all of us will go through when our child or our grandchild has been diagnosed? Or a sibling has been diagnosed, because you've got children in a family, it's rarely just one child. There may be siblings that are younger and older. Remember, ages and stages matter. They'll handle it differently. So what are the passages of grief that we're all thrown into? Kubler-Ross did a phenomenal job giving people who had terminal cancer stages that they could expect to go through. The problem is we took those and applied it to any kind of grief and made concrete steps out of them. And that doesn't serve anybody well. Oh, you've gone through this stage, you can't go back. Yes, you can. So I refer to it as passages of grief that we go through. There are 3. The first is the oh no of it all. When you first get the diagnosis, the oh no. It's almost like we want to say it can't be real. And I remember that with both of our daughters saying, oh no, that, wow, this isn't really happening. If any of you have experienced a death this year, the first thing is, oh no. When there's been a major loss of any kind, oh no. Now, that first passage of grief really is a biological savior for us in the sense that we go into shock. That shock allows us to do things that in our mind, put together, we would never be able to do. You cannot buy a coffin for a child within the state of mind of normalcy. It's the oh no, the shock of it all. To be able to get to the hospital and go through all the journey you go through with the surgeries and the treatments without that oh no. So that lasts about 7 days. The ancients knew well how to grieve because almost every faith tradition has 7 days of grieving. We've shortened it culturally today but we need to allow ourselves that 7 days of shock where we just kind of get through. And we need to allow others to help us through that time. And if you are dealing with a friend or a relative who's going through that first passage of grief, that in Judaism, when you sit Shiva, they have a saying that you do not speak to the person who is sitting Shiva because they've lost someone in their family, they've had a death, until they have spoken. And that's not a bad rule of thumb if you're, I try to avoid that expression, back that one up a moment, but as a way of doing that, to be able to say, I don't know what to say. You don't even have to say that, because when someone's sitting Shiva, you wait for them to speak. They may want to talk about the journey they've just been on the last few days in a death, or the diagnosis of a child. To just wait to see, do they want to talk about the past? They want about the present, what's happened in the last 7 days, or what's happened over a lifetime? To be present to what they need again. And so the first passage is the "oh no" of it all. Lasts about 7 days. Then we move into the intense sorrow. And that intense sorrow, we get on with our lives. We go back to work. We go back into the world that we had known pre-diagnosis. And it's not the same, because everything, even the good times, are colored with a steel cold gray now of the reality of the diagnosis. And just know that that's real and it's okay. You may be at a birthday party and be joyous, and then suddenly be hit with that sadness. Some of you may have had multiple births, and so you have a twin, one who's been diagnosed, the other not. And there is a sadness there as you're celebrating a birthday, not knowing if one of those siblings will celebrate another birthday. And yet there's the joy. So allow yourself that space to know that even the good times will be colored with this cold gray of the reality of it. It lasts about 6 months, some a year. And the journey of cancer can be a long one. So don't be surprised if that's intense sorrow is with you. The Navajos have a saying, if it's been a catastrophic event or multiple losses, and I have to say, anyone who has a diagnosis of cancer during the time of COVID, remember that is a multiple loss right there, and a catastrophic kind of diagnosis. So be aware that it may last longer. And the Navajos say 2 times 4 seasons, and saying in essence that it takes longer when there are multiple issues happening. And so we have the piercing grief of the "oh no" of it all, the intense sorrow. The third passage is sadness. It's been tempered with the joy of getting on with life. It's sadness and joy. How do you know you're in the third passage? Doesn't feel bad to feel good. And when you get to that stage, a young boy who had been in remission with leukemia, he had gone through these passages and had that sadness of the reality of the leukemia, but it was tempered with the joy of truly getting on with his own life. And then the cancer came back. And he said to his dad, "Do you think I'll get to that third passage again?" And his dad said, "We're going to get through this together." But his son knew enough that these are passages that he could go through. So you can share that. And even a 3-4-year-old can understand the shock of it all, the sorrow, where everything is gray, and then getting on. The getting on with your own life. And for those of you who've had a death of a child, that's the biggest hole you can put in anyone's heart, is to have a child die. I then go back to the ancients. There's a joyous story. A man died, and then his son died, and then his son died. And people say, that's a joyous story. Yes, they died in order. The hardest thing to do and the biggest hole you can put in a heart is to have a child die. And just know that if your child does die, you will go through those passages. Now, does it mean once you get into that third passage, it's not going to happen again? When our daughter went off to university, she was pulling us along, our oldest daughter, who had a lifelong illness, pulling us along to the third passage of the joy of getting on with their own life. And your children, when they know that, they can help us. They're often helping us get through. They may have gotten through those passages faster than us. But then when her sister was diagnosed a year later with an illness that could take her life, it was Anna that helped us get through those passages and helped her sister get through them. But the reality was we went back to the first passage of grief for Anna. That same pain hit us again. It hit us for our second daughter and it hit us for our first. You may hear a song and it will bring you back to that first passage of the oh no of it all. And so know that these are passages that will reoccur. And if you have a child who's gone into remission, there's that sense of relief, but there's always that foreboding, will it come back? And just recognize that's the sadness tempered with the joy of enjoying the time that we do have there. So we have those three passages there. And know with siblings how they begin to deal with it and be open to them. I blew it with my own son, not being tuned into what his needs were, thinking the most important were our daughters at the moment. And there are times that he came to understand that no, we are not making it to that soccer game. We will make it to the next one. Or maybe one of us can go, the other will not be there, because the others need one another and they need us there as well. When I was a nun, our novice directress, who was in her 60s at that time, shared a story with us as if it was happening now. She said her brother had died very suddenly of a horrible virus, and her mom took to bed trying to cope with the death of her son that was so quick. And finally, her older sister went in days later and said, "Mom, our brother's dead, but we're still alive and we need you." And it was what could shake her out of that. Your other children need you to go through the good times with them as well. Now, you will notice I've dealt mostly with an illness and death here, but I want you to know that, and you'll see it on the handout, that it applies to all different situations that you may be faced with. And some of you, rarely does it just one thing we're dealing with. It was multiple things you might be dealing with. And with COVID-19 added on top of that. So be sure that you know that you can look at the Tao of family, and in any rough time, affection, sense of optimism. And you say, where am I going to get that reserve of optimism? We need it from one another. Martin Buber said it so beautifully. I am I and you are thou. I'm unique, you're unique, and we have a common humanity. We're in this together, all of us. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu said it so beautifully. We're interdependent, interrelated, and interconnected. Know that we can draw your group, Ontario Parenting Advocating for Children with Cancer. You know you can depend on one another because you're on that journey, a very similar. Remember, each one of our journeys are unique, but we have a commonness about it, and that's having someone in our family diagnosed with cancer, a child diagnosed with cancer. And all the fears that will be there, the questions, we can rely on one another to help us through that. So that time, affection, sense of optimism, the passages that we go through, the piercing grief of the oh no, the intense sorrow, and the sadness tempered with joy, we may swing back around through those and several times over in our lives. And remember, in the good times and the rough times, this too will pass. So I'm open to questions here. Make sure you know that you can seek help. If you feel like when you're grieving is no longer a good morning, and you'll know on the handout, I have a checklist that you as families can go through. If you're concerned that one of your children is not handling this well, that it's okay to get help. It's a healthy thing to do, to get help with one another and outside of the circle of people who are going through a similar thing, to get a different perspective and some support. I am open to questions.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I loved your presentation.
Did we get through that? Did we get through that without buffer?
Without buffer, it was great. Thank you. And I love how you inject humor into the presentation, which is, you know, a serious subject, but I was laughing. I was laughing at the Luke and me and the gator. I don't know. It was just funny. So
I gotta tell you, that little girl, when she said that, got a big kick out of the others. You know, you'll be surprised where children find their humor. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
question.
That was funny. So we have a question here from Pam, and she says, I'd love to know, how did you manage the worry that goes with having a child with a lifelong illness? How do you find the balance between worry and joy?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I have spent a bit of time with my husband on this. My mother-in-law was a constant worrier, and she worried about things that didn't come to pass, but had spent a lot of time worrying about it. And I said, and my husband seemed to have picked that trait up, and he said, aren't you worried? When our kids were diagnosed. And I said, what good would it do? I said, I do what's called assertive worrying. I worry when I need to, and then there's no time to. So if you can take that tack, because think of the things we worry about. Is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? We waste all that time on the worry about it happening, that we don't get to enjoy the joy of what's happening right now, or the sorrow, or to be tuned in. So and my husband's gotten better about doing assertive worrying. My mother-in-law, my husband was coming home in a snowstorm, and he was a very responsible driver. And I knew that if he needed to pull over, he would do that. But she's calling me, is he home yet? Is he home yet? She worried about it. And then she said, don't care. And I said, I care a lot. And if the police come to the door and say something happened, guess what? I'll need to handle it. And if he walks through the door safe, I won't be ready to wring his neck, having worried so much. So it's a matter of doing what's called assertive worrying. Worry when you need to. Can you be anxious? Yes. Can you be kicked in the gut? Yes. But to worry about what might happen is to waste looking at the future. You don't know what's happening, and not being present to what's going on right now. Because really all we do have is the right now. With a daughter with a lifelong illness, we are looking, it's MS, by the way. She walked down the driveway, crawled back at 17. So we had 2 diagnosed at 17. And you know, there's so much research being done today, and many of you see that in cancer research right now, and the magnificent changes that are being made. And some of it's coming as a result of research into COVID-19 and the different kinds of treatments that are now available. And so I am very hopeful. And I have found in my life, it just did not serve me well to ever worry about the future when you really don't know, and then you don't have time to enjoy what's here. So do I concern myself? Yeah, we keep ourselves safe, but I also let go. And once the doctor, I got to tell you, one of the biggest things was when the doctor said, so you don't think your child can go through her own life journey? And whoa, yes, we have to say, you know, this is her life journey, not mine. And I am here for her, whatever she needs, all 3 of them, whatever they need. And our son, by the way, the 2 were diagnosed, wouldn't go to a doctor his senior year. He said, I'm not going to get diagnosed with anything. And when he graduated from high school, and he's an artist, so, it might have been a struggle getting him through high school. His sisters embraced him in front of some teachers at graduation. You made it, Joe, you made it. And some of the teachers were probably saying, yeah, we weren't sure he'd make it through. But that's not what they were talking about. They were talking about the fact he was not diagnosed with anything his senior year. Now think about that. He could have been diagnosed the next day. But for them, that was their bond, is their brother didn't get diagnosed his senior year. So, and added a bit of humor to the day, and we need humor. So does that help with the worry? It's called assertive worrying. Worry when you need to, and then there's no time to, because you'll be too busy dealing what's right in front of you.
That's great. Thank you. I have another question from Jen. Do you have any advice for couples who are parents of a child living with cancer? How to have endurance, how to stay together on this road?
Yes. And the biggest one, it says my internet is unstable, so I might be buffering right here. The biggest thing you can do is seek others to help support you. Be willing to ask for help from others. Maybe it's other families where the father and the mother, and it doesn't have to be the same gender. It can be that a mother can help a father in another family, a father can help a mother in another family, two mothers being on that journey to get the support. And that's why groups like yours are so critical, because remember, you're both dealing with the hopes that you have for your child, the dreams that you have for your child, and then the kick in the gut that your child has cancer. And so you want one another to be there to support one another, but you don't have the energy to. So recognize that. If you recognize it and give one another the space to seek out help from others and be supportive and get away from it. For a brief moment, give yourselves some joyous time together. Remember, if you're in those passages, that steel cold gray may be hovering right there, but give yourself some space to remember that you're in this together and that you do have the words to say to one another. Sometimes it's being very quiet, but go to groups, get the help. And you might think, well, I can help another family, and be surprised, just as my daughter was. She got as much help from the young children she worked with as she offered to them with some hope. So it is a tough time. And we often see separations and divorce when a child has been diagnosed, and it doesn't have to be that way. It'll show cracks in any relationship. And all of us have some cracks, so we just don't want it to widen. We need to be there without adding one more grief for a child or for ourselves. So get help. It's a good thing to do.
Thank you. I do have another question from someone who had registered before, and she had a question. How do you not feel guilty for being the lucky ones with children in remission when others are not?
I've been there. Because our daughter left the ward and some kids did not. And that was such a wake up to us to be grateful for every day. It's called survivor guilt. And it's real. And it is a very heavy thing to deal with. And I think we need to honor that that's what we're feeling, be able to speak it to someone, and not to the person who's just had a child die, but to others, because you don't need to get comfort from them right now. They need you to embrace them. So get from others and say, I feel guilty about the fact that my child survived. And say, that's a real feeling. Feelings are not good or bad, they're real. And then you say, I try to turn that into gratitude, that sense that I am grateful that my child survived, and that I need to be open to the pain this family is feeling. And I found that was helpful to look at that guilt and then feel grateful. Honor the guilt, honor that you felt it, and then move as much as you can into gratitude that your child has, and then do whatever you can to be there. And they might say, having had a child die, that you don't understand. And you have to say, you're right. Can I get dinner for you? Can I take your other child to soccer? I just want to be here for you. That will help with your dealing with it. And then every day celebrating that gratitude that your child is in remission. Yes, we did go through that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? You can jump right in, turn on your video and ask, or type it in the chat. Just want to make sure we don't miss anyone's questions before we wrap up. Okay, maybe not. Oh,
have you?
Can you say that again?
It's a very difficult lecture for many of you who are right in the midst of it. And just remember that we will get through this. That sense of optimism. And again, it's not getting over it, around it, we'll get through it, whatever it is.
Thank you, Barbara. And as Barbara had mentioned, some handouts, we'll have those available to share along with the recordings tomorrow on our social media. I'll email it to everybody who attended here tonight. And check out her website, kidsareworthit.com. She's got great resources there. Her books are there. And just to learn more about Barbara and her talks. And also remember, OPAC is here for you. We are parents of children with cancer, most of us, and we do have our weekly drop-ins with our wonderful parent liaisons, Susan, Michelle, and Karen, and they are there to support you in your journey, to know that you're not alone in this journey. OPAC is here to help and support you in any way that you need. So please check out opac.org for more information, opacc.org. And I guess that's it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for a wonderful talk, Barbara. Always wonderful.
And it's been a joy. And if you go to Kids Are Worth It, there's one issue I did not cover tonight. And that's the issue of children with cancer being targeted by peers. And you think, oh my goodness, how could that possibly happen? It does happen. And I have a free 68-page download on bullying. I took my bully book, condensed it to a much more readable form. It's free on the website. It's just on the front page. Because it is an issue. They happen to have a scar. They are physically not able to do some of the tasks that they may. And you say, how could anybody do that? You just, that it happens. And we need to be aware of how we can help our children through that.
That's great, Barbara. Maybe we can have you back for another talk on bullying. Sorry.
Yeah, happy to. I always am happy to work with you folks because I've been there. We've been through it, and we, you know, my husband's family has trauma in it, and that's what Grandma died of, and Dawn's mother. And Dawn also had been diagnosed, but caught early enough to deal with it. So we've learned far more about cancer than we'd ever care to know, as many of you have. The words were all new to you and the treatments, and I'm just amazed at our great scientists and our great researchers who have come up with some phenomenal ways to help us through this.
All right, thank you so much. You're a wealth of information, as Susan just said here. And everybody have a good night. Thank you for joining us tonight. Take care. Bye.